Hello and welcome to World Talks on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. Donald Trump is arranging a trilateral meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Russian leader Vladimir Putin. That's one of the key outcomes of yesterday's meeting between the US President, his Ukrainian counterpart, and a group of European leaders. In addition, the leaders gathered in Washington, D.C., spoke about security guarantees for Ukraine, with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte claiming a breakthrough on the matter. To unpack the European perspective, we're joined by Andreas Umland from the Swedish Institute of International Affairs. Mr. Umland, welcome back to TVP World. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for having me again.
A pleasure, sir. So let's start with the European perspective. An unusual display of unity amongst all of these European countries. Would you agree?
Yes, and not only of European countries, but the important thing here that there was a certain feeling, at least, of unity and community between the US president and these European representatives. And that may have been the main positive outcome of this meeting, that not only the relationship between Zelensky and Trump seems to have been at least partly restored, but also that these Western leaders have come together. The main missing part here, of course, being a representative from Poland, which, in my opinion, should have been at this table, but for some reason, and perhaps you know better than me, there was neither the Polish president nor the Polish prime minister.
Yes, well, that is yet to be examined in more detail. But tell me something. First of all, what is it that has brought all these disparate European countries together on this particular issue? And that, of course, includes Ursula von der Leyen, the European Union head, and Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO. What is the uniting factor?
Well, the perception of the Russian-Ukrainian war has changed over the last years, and especially over the last months. And the issue of Ukrainian security is now largely seen as being central to the issue of all European security. And that's why these leaders have, of course, come out of solidarity with Ukraine to this meeting. But I think they have also come out of their own national interest to this meeting, because they see the outcome of this war as being not just very important for Ukraine, but also for the rest of Europe. And I would even say that perhaps the national representatives, the presidents and prime ministers that were there, rather than Rutte and von der Leyen as representatives of Western organizations who were also there, were the most important ones. And that makes me actually hopeful that perhaps this format that we saw last night could be also something for the future, perhaps with the addition of a Polish representative that could then assemble after, let's say, the next negotiation round, for which I don't have high hopes, even if Putin and Zelensky meet alone or with Trump. I don't think anything substantial will come out of this. And then hopefully this format will be then continued that we saw last night, and we will then again see an assembly of these people and decide then what is to be done.
Yeah. Now, I think many would agree with you that this unity, if it, should continue to be more influential. Before I move on to the coalition of the willing, as it's so called, I'd like to ask your view on the level of influence that this group of leaders had on the conversation when they met Trump in Washington. How well did they manage to persuade Trump away from Putin's argument, which is what Trump seemed to be agreeing with after the meeting between Putin and Trump? How influential were the Europeans?
Well, from the public meeting, from the public part that we saw yesterday, apparently they got Trump away from these ridiculous issues like swapping Ukrainian territory for Ukrainian territory, giving Russia the northern Donbas, making Ukraine agree to a permanent loss of Crimea or something like that, or forcing Ukraine to make Russian the second state language or something like that. At least in the public part, nothing of that was discussed. So, and perhaps that was a result actually of the influence of the Western leaders on Trump, that he dropped these ideas that were certainly communicated to Trump by Putin when they met. So that is a success, and hopefully these issues will not come up again.
Understood.
I think they play actually quite an important role. Another factor that I think is sometimes underestimated here is the change in public opinion. In the US, we've seen a rise of support for Ukraine over the last months, even among voters, Republican voters, and this sort of domestic factor, I think, is also something important that makes Trump here behave in a different way than he did in February at the scandalous White House meeting with Vance and Zelensky.
Understood. Now, you know, a major pillar of any peace deal in Ukraine is the security guarantee aspect, and that is something that all these European leaders are more than willing to, or you're committed to supporting the so-called coalition of the willing. What does that mean? What are the expectations of these leaders in supporting those security guarantees?
Frankly, I'm a little bit surprised that this takes up so much space, this issue, because I see these security guarantees being implemented only in a faraway future, because the problem that is now there is that the countries that have announced that they would be ready to send troops for implementing security guarantees to Ukraine, they would have to also secure domestically that actually the parliaments of these countries then agree to such a deployment. But even more complicated is here the issue that Russia is against Western troops on Ukrainian soil, and the deployment of Western troops on Ukrainian soil would only, as far as I understand, happen once there is a ceasefire. But because Russia is against these Russian troops on Western soil, there will be no ceasefire. So there is a little bit of a strategic, and I would even say logical mismatch here in the intense discussion of these security guarantees. Although I don't see them being implemented for now. We would first have to get to a ceasefire, and then the security guarantees can be implemented. And even then, I'm actually skeptical how many troops there will be, and which countries will then be actually really able and willing to send troops. So for me, that is a little bit, at the current stage, at least, too early. I think it is very important, of course. Yeah. But first, we have to get to a condition where actually...
Mr. Umland, the thing is that the security guarantees has more than just the troops, boots on the ground. It has things like, bolstering the Ukraine's military and providing some kind of air cover and the logistical aspects of getting things into Ukraine. I mean, those could go in with limited, support necessarily from each country's parliaments. Also, there is this plan on the table to buy 90 billion euros of American weaponry by Ukraine, and that's going to be funded by the European countries. Now, that, of course, is very interesting to Trump, but it's a win-win-win all round, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, these issues, a German journalist just said yesterday evening, Vasily Golod, reporting from Kyiv on German television, the most important security guarantee of Ukraine is the Ukrainian army. And supporting the Ukrainian army is something that we can and should be talking today about. And that should be the currently relevant topic of discussion. The other issue that can be also now already discussed before a ceasefire are no-fly zones over Ukraine that could be implemented with the help of Western, let's say, fighter planes, and that would be also a sort of an engagement of a Western military engagement in which no Russian soldiers would be killed. Probably no Western soldiers would be killed because what we're talking here is only unmanned flying vehicles, let's say, over Western and Central Ukraine that could be shut down by Western fighter planes, something as we have seen that like the West has implemented with Israel when Israel was attacked massively by Iran. So these should be the topics of the discussion. But the Western troops major Western troops in Ukraine, I don't see that something happening in the near future. And there are several steps before that have to be done before we could actually talk about a full security engagement or a NATO accession or something like that. A major security treaty.
Certainly a complex and perhaps slow process. But Mr. Umland, as always, thank you very much for sharing your analysis with our audience. Have a good day, sir.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you. And that brings us to the end of this episode of World Talks. But as always, don't go away. Lots more coming up. Goodbye.